This is TWiT.
Recall our coverage last week of Ars Technica's reporting, which was titled, quote, How a Microsoft Blunder Opened Millions of PCs to Potent Malware Attacks, unquote, and that indeed some follow-up digging revealed that many malware strains had been found to be actively leveraging known vulnerable drivers in what is now called the BYOVD, the Bring Your Own Vulnerable Driver attack. And also recall that Microsoft's minions, even those in elevated positions of authority, were openly rude and hostile to the researchers who were just trying to help, to prompt them and to understand what was going on. And Microsoft said, this is the way we want it. Well, okay, this may be where shining a bright public light can help, since Microsoft has gotten off their butts and finally, after 3 years of neglect, fixed this arguably important issue. Last Thursday, ZDNet carried the news with their headline, Next Windows 10/11 Patch Tuesday. Okay, that means a week from tomorrow. A week from today. Next Tuesday will be Patch Tuesday for November. They said next Windows 10/11 Patch Tuesday fixes Microsoft's botched vulnerable driver blocklist. And the subhead was Microsoft addresses an issue preventing Windows 10's vulnerable driver blocklist from being updated with new vulnerable drivers. Okay, so here's how ZDNet summarized the situation. They said Microsoft has released a new non-security preview, has released, how like they do the non-security previews the month before. So Microsoft has released a new non-security preview of November's Patch Tuesday update for Windows 10 and Windows 11 22H2. It brings improvements to the taskbar, Microsoft account, and task manager, as well as a fix for a serious Microsoft blunder that left a hole in the Windows 10 vulnerable driver block list. The preview is a non-security update that's available for Windows 10 and Windows 11 22H2. It contains all the changes in the upcoming November Patch Tuesday except security patches. However, this preview also includes Microsoft's answer to a serious security-related error that the company made with its Windows kernel vulnerable driver block list, an optional security hardening capability introduced to Windows 10 version 1809, so like the old one, that's on by default in Windows 11 22H2. Microsoft has explained that the failed updates to the block list were due to it, and this weird language, to it only updating for full Windows OS releases. They said, although it's not clear if this means previously installed Windows versus fresh installs, or just that older versions of Windows were stuck on a block list that couldn't be updated. What does it mean? Full Windows OS releases. In a support page detailing, quote, the vulnerable driver block list after the October 2022 preview release, Microsoft states, this October 2022 preview release addresses an issue that only updates the block list for full Windows OS releases. Okay, so does that mean they're changing that or not? We don't know. They said, when you install this release, the block list on older OS versions will be the same as the block list on Windows 11 version 21H2 and later. Okay, so a catch-up. Microsoft had told Ars Technica, writes ZDNet, that it was in fact regularly updating the vulnerable driver list, but that there was a, quote, a gap in synchronization across OS versions. Again, it's no longer possible, apparently, to get Microsoft to actually tell anyone what's going on. You just have to poke it and experiment and figure it out for yourself. So they said so the October 2022 preview release is the promised fix, which should be released broadly in the November 2022 Patch Tuesday, again next week, through Windows Update. Microsoft's release notes for the October Windows 11 22H2 preview update states, it updates the Windows kernel vulnerable driver block list that is in the, and I'll explain what this means in a second, but they said in the driver SI policy.p7b file. This, and I'll explain that. This update also ensures that the block list is the same across Windows 10 and Windows 11. For more information, see Knowledge Base 5020779. So Microsoft has a page where they talk about recommended driver block rules, which provides a bit more clarity. They say on that page, and I have a link in the show notes, they say, and this is what's weird, okay? The block list, this is official Microsoft.com. Actually, it's learn.microsoft.com. They said the block list is updated with each new major release of Windows, typically 1 to 2 times per year, but now I guess only 1 time a year because we're not doing 2 times a year Windows updates, okay? Including most recently with the Windows 11 2022 update released in September 2022. The most current block list is now also available for Windows 10 20H2 and Windows 11 21H2 users as an optional update from Windows Update. Microsoft will occasionally publish future updates through regular Windows servicing. But apparently, like only with each new major release of Windows, which nobody understands. Then they continue saying, customers who always want the most up-to-date driver block list, well, who would want that? They said, can also use Windows Defender Application Control, WDAC, to apply the latest recommended driver block list contained in this article. For your convenience, we've provided a download of the most up-to-date vulnerable driver block list, along with instructions to apply it to your computer at the end of this article. Otherwise, you can use the XML provided below to create your own custom WDAC policies. Okay, so they're saying here that the block list is updated with each new major release of Windows, typically 1 to 2 times per year. So it's curious that for some reason, the exploitation of known malicious Windows kernel drivers will apparently be allowed deliberately and by policy for as long as 1 year or during the length of time of the gap between major Windows releases. And this is current policy. Given that BYOVD now has its own abbreviation and that the exploitation of such drivers has unfortunately become popular, it sure would seem that some policy rethinking of this, we're only going to update this list with new major releases of Windows, should be reconsidered. That page also said customers who always want the most up-to-date driver block list can also use Windows Defender Application Control to apply the latest recommended driver block list contained in this article. So I have those instructions and a link to that page in the show notes. But anyone wishing not to wait can easily update their system's driver block list. So to give you a sense for this, it's download the WDAC policy refresh tool, and that's easy to find. It's at aka.ms/refresh policy. Download and extract the vulnerable driver block list binaries. Now that's easy to find too. That's at aka.ms/vulnerable driver block list. Then they said, and that actually gives you a zip with 4 files. They said select either the audit-only version or the enforced version and rename the file to sipolicy.p7b. Copy sipolicy.p7b to, and then your Windows directory /system32 /code integrity. Then they finally said, run the WDAC policy refresh tool you downloaded in step 1 above to activate and refresh all WDAC policies on your computer. So, okay, not difficult to do. For some reason, they don't want to do that for us, except every major Windows release or so. So, anyway.
Is there some way to protect that file? Like, make it be, like,
presumably
root access to it or something? It seems like that'd be kind of just sitting there as a plain text file or something.
Presumably that WDAC policy refresh tool is not something that malware can use. That seems to be the thing you need to take this, all those 4 zip files. They're 95 kbyte files, all dated October 19th, so middle of last month, and you get to choose between audit or enforce in either the server or the workstation flavor. So there's 4 different ones, and hopefully, as you suggest, Microsoft has prevented bad things from happening to these policies or turning them off. But it's just strange to me that why aren't known bad drivers, known malicious drivers as important to fix every month as others? Is that like everything else? I don't get it. Oh, by the way, when you apply these new policies, you must reboot, because they note on their page that just having the policies doesn't prevent things that are already running, like they're not going to get kicked out of Windows. It's only when they're trying to get themselves loaded that the policy looks at it and goes, not so fast, and denies it access. So, and it turns out I can't even turn it on my Windows 10 system because I've got a couple drivers that are not sanctioned, and
now I know why they didn't do this. Not all drivers are sanctioned.
Yes.
And they knew it would cause tech support calls.
Yes.
There you go.
It's like, hey, why can't I use this? I want to turn this on.
Are they weirdo drivers that you have? I mean, what is...
Yeah, there are a couple weirdo drivers. So, yeah, there's one that I actually hacked myself and signed in order to...
What could possibly go wrong?
It was something that Lori needed for one of her, in order to distribute software, and it wasn't working, so I hacked it and fixed it.
It's nice to have a handy husband around the house.
And then Windows wouldn't run, and it wouldn't load anymore, so I got it signed. And then when it popped up in the list last night, I thought, yeah, that could be a problem.
Yeah, maybe you don't want this block list.
Anyway, for everybody else, it's when you try to turn this on, Windows will say, what about this? And I think there were 3 things that were a little sketchy that I had on my computer. So, yeah. Okay.
But folks, he knows what he's doing. Don't try this at home.
No. And it turns out it's kind of tricky to get Microsoft to sign a driver. You've got to, tell them, I'm a good guy. And they said, we don't know. We heard your podcast. Oh.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.